Is photography an art form? Yes, undoubtedly it's an art form. A lot of my early work was done when Photoshop didn't exist, and I developed some techniques that enabled me to photograph grown men with beards and make them look like they had porcelain skin. If any of you know my work, you'll know in particular that some of the pictures, well, all of the pictures that I did with Boy George from Culture Club, it's all completely unretouched. Camera manipulation and lighting and film processing control were my tools long before Photoshop, years before Photoshop was even invented. Who's the most famous person I've worked with? That's not really a question that I can answer, because fame, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. I've worked with a lot of people who are well known, a lot of very well known musicians, actors, models, but it's not really for me to say who is the most famous, because if you've never heard of somebody, then they're not famous. But then somebody that you know could be, in your mind, the most amazing, the most famous person on the planet. So really, that's a personal choice. It's not something that I can give comment on. Have I ever photographed a personal idol? Yeah, I have. Just once. Back in the 1980, I think it was, and it was Hugh Cornwall from the Stranglers. At the time, I was a huge fan of the band. They were huge. They were everywhere. I'm still a fan of the Stranglers. I remember waiting for him to arrive at the studio. I was literally pacing up and down with nerves. I had no idea what to expect. Obviously, from a sort of media point of view, the Stranglers had quite an aggressive image. Obviously, have quite an aggressive name. So I had no idea. Up to that point, I'd only really worked with people that I knew that were up and coming in the music business. And he arrived. He brought a suit bag with him, had a white t-shirt, a leather jacket, and a plain white shirt. And he asked me what I thought he should wear. I said, everyone has seen you in a white t-shirt and a leather jacket, so why don't we just use the plain shirt? Which we did. We took the pictures. He was really lovely, and the picture was very well received. It was published in loads of places, went around the world, and that was the first and the last time that I ever worked with somebody I would consider to be an idol. Sometimes people can turn up at the studio, and you can be quite surprised at how unpleasant they are. And in those circumstances, you have to be able to deal with that, and you have to win them over only enough so that you can get the job done. You don't have to end up being their best friend forever, but you can't. There's no room in my business to be in awe of your subject. Do I prefer working in a studio or on location? It doesn't matter. I've worked on some of the most beautiful beaches in the world, photographing some of the most beautiful girls for fashion magazines and advertising campaigns. I've also worked in some of the most disgustingly dingy studios you can imagine, and I've worked in some fantastic studios. It doesn't matter. The location of the shoot is irrelevant, so long as everybody can get there and everybody can leave without any damage or harm. I don't mind.
I'm Paul Ostra. I've always been a commercial photographer all my working life, and then in 2005 I woke up one morning with an extraordinary compulsion to paint. I don't know where it came from. Fortunately that day I had nothing else to do, so I got in my car, went to an art shop and told them my absolute need to paint, and really that was the beginning. I knew that I wanted to paint people. I literally photographed thousands of faces as a professional photographer. And then I had a solo exhibition, Reflections, which was all about self-portraits. And this was very important for me. And it also allowed me to move on to the next chapter of my painting. At the moment I'm working on a show in Italy called Who Are You?, which I'm very excited about. it's really giving me the opportunity to move on from purely self-portraiture and involving other people and situations, particularly continuing strongly with the theme of identity. In this painting, I'm challenging the perceptions of identity. I've chosen to paint a girl who is innocent looking, but she's standing there with a very dangerous weapon, an AK-47. In these two pieces, I'm talking about conflict. The first piece is of an unknown Italian soldier. The inspiration behind this was I was visiting the Dolomites in northern Italy and heard stories of the extraordinary conflict and loss of life there. This one is more personal. It's of my great uncle, Corporal Charles Davies, who was killed in a trench in the First World War. And I remember my grandmother talking about her brother Charles, and I inherited, in fact, his cap badge and some medals, and I was able to obtain just a photograph of his face.
Hi, my name's Laura Lockington and I'm a writer. I write books, I write for magazines and I write for newspapers. I also run the Bookish Supper Society here in Brighton and in Italy, where we have lots of different writers who come and be interviewed and I cook supper for them. I am really all things bookish, and I think the one thing I've learnt about writing over the years is that we write books and we read books to know that we're not alone. And I think that's a really important thing. My other love is flash fiction. And flash fiction is a very, very short story that is very accessible and anyone can take part in it. And I will show you how to do one of those in a moment. But the other thing I wanted to say is that it doesn't matter how you read. You can read on a Kindle, you can read in a book, you can read in a magazine. And I think the most important thing is that you're reading, because it really does change lives. So one of the things I'm very interested in and that I do is flash fiction. And flash fiction is a form of short storytelling, but it's a really, really, really short story. And hopefully it either amuses or surprises or sometimes shocks people. And what I'll be doing in the Who Are You exhibition in Thiene is writing flash fiction about the people that come into the exhibition and have a look around. So please come and say hello to me and we can make a story together. And a good example would be, I'll pick someone in the room. So I'm going to pick the cameraman in this room, and let's do something, a tiny little piece of fiction about him. So the cameraman looks hungry. He wishes he'd had breakfast this morning before he started work. He remembers a breakfast he had once sitting on top of a castle in Spain. He'd had a dozen oysters and a pint of champagne. He'd also had a slice of chocolate cake. His only companion had been a small black dog. The cameraman sighed. Now that had been a breakfast fit for kings. That's an example of a tiny bit of flash fiction. Really looking forward to seeing you all at the Who Are You exhibition in Thiene, and don't forget to come and say hello and let's make a story together. Thank you.